Recording is on.
Well, hello again, everybody. It's December the 5th, and this is the Western meeting. We had the Eastern meeting this morning. So welcome to the Extinctionati, and I'll throw the floor open to anybody that wants to voice anything, any topics that they want to discuss, any questions they got. How is everybody?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys?
All good here.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
I'm going back to work after a 3-week vacation, so it's going to be a shock tomorrow.
Did you have to get jabbed to go to work?
Pardon me?
Did you have to get jabbed? Is it mandatory?
We can opt to get tested every week. So I have not been jabbed. At this point in time, I just feel work is getting more difficult as far as, all the requirements, the changing, I consider it a changing condition of employment. And I believe it will creep even more into just being mandated totally. So I'm making plans to exit.
Problem is that so many contracts in the US are employment at will, so they can just, come in one morning and say they're just firing you because of the weather. So, yeah, it's completely in the employer's hands, although the law claims that it's an equitable contract. But how can it be an equitable contract? It's like nobody can survive without a job. Nobody can get medical care without a job, really, before Obamacare. So it's like, it's ridiculous.
But
I've come to the point where I used to think, I have good health benefits, have a good insurance plan, have good pension. But I've come to the point that at any time, those can be taken away, especially right now. I hear there are rumblings afoot of insurance premiums becoming higher for people who are not vaccinated. All kinds of things. So at any time, the spigots could be turned off, even though one can say, well, I earned those. That's my pension money. That's my health insurance. At any time, the carpet can be pulled from under one. And it's a false sense of security to say that, like for someone like me who's striven for security in all my work decisions, at any time they can be taken away. They're just illusions. But intellectually I've come to that, but emotionally I haven't, or psychologically I haven't accepted the reality of that. That like you can't say, I'm fine. I put aside these things. I planned for my future. There is no future, and at any time whatever you saved could be taken from you.
Yeah, it's shocking how the American workplace and the American corporation pretends to be people's parents, and they reinforce it with language like, the family. So many companies say, the such and such family, and it's all a big con because you're not family. It's so many people I know have been fired just because drinks outside of work. They've been bad mouthing the management or something, and one guy. A couple of years ago, he was having a drink. He didn't realize that the CEO was standing behind him, and he was bad mouthing the CEO, and he was just fired on the spot. And this is, in a bar after work, outside of work. So, I've been fired from American corporation for calling the Mormons a cult. There were a lot of Mormon guys, and the CEO was a Mormon, and they spent all their time trying to, indoctrinate me with Mormonism and get me to join the LDS. And I said to this one guy, it's a cult, and he said, "What?" I said, "It's a cult. It's provable. It's a cult." And he said, "Okay, that's it." He went straight to HR, was fired for calling the LDS a cult.
But
No,
I have a question for the American people here, because I don't know, I really don't understand much about law and legality, but I know that the states are, it's just like a network, a web of legalities and solicitors and lawyers and everything. Now, when you work as a doctor, it's compulsory from the medical council to have an insurance. You can't work as a doctor without being insured in case you mess up. And of course, they make a lot of money on your back after that. But the vaccine or the jab, that's okay. I'm not going to say anything against it there. But they're not, the pharmaceutical are not liable. You can't sue if something happens, which is one of the only therapeutics that I know, because all sorts of other drugs or other health situations like surgery, and it's the only procedure that I'm really sure of that you cannot sue the companies for. So I wonder, is there anybody in America, in the legal world, looked at that? Is it impossible?
yeah, they were given special indemnity because of the circumstance. So they went to the government and they said, on condition of having this early experimental release, they wanted indemnity, and they were given it. So the government has indemnity. They give themselves indemnity rights. So if you're in the military, you haven't got a hope of suing the government. If you're in a policeman, teacher, or something, even in the States, you really haven't got a hope. The military can do what they effectively like, and there'll be no recourse. Even you can have a military tribunal is all you can hope for. But a lot of people in the military have been hard done by, and they, especially in the Gulf War and Gulf War syndrome, there's absolutely no recourse. They make, when you join up, they make you sign away all your rights, and companies do as well. So it's all based on contract law, and the big fiction is that it's between two consenting parties of equals. So there's a standard in law of commercial law called the meeting of minds, and they say that if a contract can be invalidated if there wasn't a meeting of minds, if there was a genuine misunderstanding, or there was an asymmetric relationship, or the contract was signed under duress. Now, the up and down every state's jurisdiction that I know of, the federal and Supreme Courts, every circuit court has upheld the thing that a contract between an organization like a corporation and an individual is a free contract done between equals. And they will not accept the argument that you have to have a job and the employer doesn't have to have employees. So that it's very flexible about whether you take on employees. So the bargaining chip is entirely in the employees' hands, to the point where You know, what does the company lose if it doesn't employ you? Nothing. But you might starve to death in America. And so, but the courts won't uphold that it's a contract signed under duress, but clearly it is. So there's no protection. All the unions have been gutted. They were gutted since Reagan fired all the air traffic controllers, and they just went through with the scythe during the 80s. There's nothing left now. The truckers union, all of them were gone. Steel union, and they punished. Part of what globalism was to do was to punish the workers for being too uppity. The guys in Flint, Michigan, and stuff, they were all laid off, and the auto works were sent abroad. It was done to stick it to the unions. It was to spite them, and so labor can't move, but the manufacturing could move. So they gave companies carte blanche to offshore, but strict rules on movement of labor and foreign employment, and that's how they did it. So global, one of the primary things of globalism, which was almost stated in the WTO, was to break the back of labor. That was one of its goals, and was tremendously successful. All of this is, Hayek and Milton Friedman and their economics that the neocons put into practice, and was cheered by people like Joseph Stiglitz. But Stiglitz has kind of recanted. He's kind of admitted that globalism was bad and it was bad for the workers. But yeah, that's the reality.
Thank you. But does anybody know in Europe, is it the same? Have the pharmaceutical companies who are producing the jabs made similar deals with the governments of UK, France? I don't know, because I'm nobody knows that. Or...
I think they made an agreement with the EU. I'm not sure what the status is in the UK, but I guess they followed suit. But the EU, as far as I know, gave them indemnity as well. Because it's experimental. They knew it was experimental, and they knew that if anything went drastically wrong, they'd be subject to recourse. So nobody has any recourse now, because you can't sue the government, and the government says you can't sue the pharmaceuticals. So that's one of the reasons why it's immoral to, if not illegal, unconstitutional, to force people to have this medical procedure, because it is experimental and there's no recourse. So they're forcing you to do something where there's you have no ability to fight back in tort case or a case of injury.
I was reading something, and I can't remember the exact citation, but there's something about CF43. I can look it up later and send it to the group. But it said that it is illegal, and I don't know if it's unconstitutional, to force people to be part of clinical trials. And so mandating the jab is basically forcing people to participate in clinical trials without their knowledge, that there's no informed consent. So yeah, somebody was referring to that part of, I think, the Constitution. I'll have to look it up and send it to you guys. And they also mentioned something about, I don't know if it's related to the Nuremberg Code, but we can't force people to be in experimental clinical trials without their knowing it. And basically because especially, well, the jabs are experimental, basically people are the subject of the clinical trials, which are not even completed yet, they're ongoing.
Yeah, there are precedents for mandating jabs. You won't ever get the government on this one, because the government reserves the right to do these kind of things, like quasi comitatus and stuff like posse comitatus and stuff like that. In a state of emergency, they will do this. So Um, they didn't really just declare states of emergency, so it's very grey, but the courts always uphold the government because when it comes down to it, they're an arm of the government. So there's no legal recourse that you can actually take on any of the stuff. It'll be struck down wherever you go. But it's in the Geneva Convention, but there isn't a court where you can bring a suit like this and get retribution. So that's the big problem. Even if you won against the government would tell you to sod off. they wouldn't pay you, and if you went and go and seize some of the government property, they would arrest you. But maybe we should talk about the subject about the totalitarianism, because I think people are getting worried, and I think people are getting worried in Australia. But it's not as bad as you imagine. I don't think. It's actually a good thing. So what it's doing is it's radicalizing people, and we need more radical people. So overall, it's very good. Now the thing is, what to do about it in the short term. I would have this advice: is like kind of what I've said before, but I'll say it again. The don't be too hard over, right? So don't be too rigid. Be ready to bend. You may have to bend and get the jab. What I recommend is, if you are in the refuseniks camp, and you want to be a refuseniks, is don't be too absolutist about it. Don't let them break you. The whole point is to see who breaks first. So the government or the people. And so you must always be ready to just fold and just take a jab. The thing is to make them pay for it, so it's a Pyrrhic victory. So you want to stretch it out, make it more and more difficult. You see, as I said before, the government appears monolithic. They seem very, this big, indomitable bully that you just an irresistible force that you can't defeat. And it's not like that at all. It's the governments are going right out on a ledge for this. All the politicians' careers are hanging on a thread for this. In Greece and stuff, Tsipras, I can't remember what the guy's name is, but he agonized about this decision. The reason why he agonized about it is because if you mandate stuff for over 60-year-olds, there's a long experience where the farmers in Crete, they don't take any shit. They got on ferries and went to Syntagma Square more than once and brought down the fucking government. So you don't mess with a Cretan farmer. They say we're Cretan first and Greek second. And they treat everything like the invasion of Crete by the Nazis. So they tend to go to Syntagma Square with rifles if you're not careful. And so the government doesn't do these things lightly. The government is terrified. They're quaking in their boots when they do all this stuff. So they put on a brave face and they sound bombastic, and you've got to realize they're weak, they're cowering, and they're shivering in their boots when they do this stuff. So they're psychopaths. They're pushing the limit. They always go pushing to see what they can get away with. So my recommendation is, the kind of thing you got to think of is make them pay. Take it down to the wire. So if they do all of these things, you want to make sure that they take a bigger hit than you do. But don't stand on principle and go down in flames. That's not a good plan. But when, for example, this is what I would recommend to maybe Greeks and stuff. If they mandate something like over 60s get €100 fine a month, but if they don't get jabbed, it's like what you do is if you can and you don't want to, pay the 100. Just you see what they're doing with a lot of these things. They say, in Austria and Germany, and they're saying like, you must by February. it's terror tactics. They're trying to use terror against the people. What they want you to do is say, okay, I can see we're not going to win this, and cave. And you say, don't do that. Take them down to the wire. It's a test of strength. And so you have to show your will all the way down to the wire. And then you want to take it as far as it goes. Pay the fines, make them pay. See, by the time you're paying $100 a month, the situation would have changed. There might be a big reversal in the public's viewpoint. There might be people rioting in Syntagma Square. They might not. You see, they say they're going to collect that fine automatically. In other words, they're going to dock 60-year-olds' pensions, right? And put it towards the healthcare system. It's a lie. It'll just go to Germany, and everybody knows that, for payments on the interest on the loan. But anyway, the thing is, to call their bluff is say how much can I actually afford? The thing is not to say, okay, I'll fold. I understand these guys are just totalitarian and they're stronger than me and fold. That's what they're trying to get you to do. What you want to do is to say, how much can I afford? How much would I make do this principle? A couple of hundred, 300, 1,000? Then pay it. Pay for 10 months for the fine and just see how this goes down. You see that they might have to repeal it. You see, they're taking a big hit that'll last. You see, this stuff is not forgotten. And so it's actually a good thing. It's preparing people for the time when they're not. It's showing people how governments react in a crisis. And every bit that you resist now cows the government and make sure that they're not such a bully in the next crisis. So this is all good stuff. So yeah, the good news is that the G variant is it's very, very infectious. It's tearing around South Africa, but so in the next 6 to 7 weeks, it's going to go nuts all over the world. The thing is, it's not very infectious. I mean, it's super infectious. The symptoms are mild. So there's only one thing left to worry about for this thing. It's not going to. I mean, the V words, the jabs are not going to really help you with it. But the thing is, I don't think you need them. There's only one thing to worry about, and that's the thing about, is it a chimera with HIV? So does it compromise your immunity? That may be the reason why it can get around so fast. There's no herd immunity to it. Reinfection is the norm. So it could drive out all the other variants and become dominant. If it isn't something that has a retroviral aspect, that it can compromise your immune system like HIV, then it might be a good thing. The thing might have turned into the cold, and then all of the stuff will be over, right? So I would say, delay, try and make it costly for them to do it, and try and radicalize people and show resistance. The key thing is to show resistance to the government, not the bug. And so the thing is that it's not the end of the world. They will do these things, and they will try and keep them in place. They'll try and keep passports in place and things like that, because they want it to be a social credit score. But they're arousing enmity, and it's better that they institute all these things, and then we have a backlash before the real collapse, right? This is not collapse, right? This is just an inconvenience on the road, and this shows their colors, and it really aids us. So it really aids the people and Team Human, because it's shown a whole raft of complacent people in the middle that the government is not to be trusted, and they're your worst friend in a crisis. So governments should topple. There are going to be backlashes left and right in democracies. This is all good, right? It's all very good news. Don't be cowed by it. So that's what I got to say. Do you have anything to add to that, Sophie?
No, thank you very much. You were going to talk about authoritarianism, and I was going to, this morning we touched a little bit on that with the Eastern meeting, but I think maybe we need to. You see, you mentioned, yes, this is a test run. It's not the collapse. They're establishing certain patterns of surveillance, social credits, different passports, different apps, and all sorts of other, maybe we don't know. Most of all, we don't know. And I would like, maybe we could start to talk about this a little bit more. The looming totalitarian plan.
You can't really stop it. So
No.
the thing is to realize that all these moves are bluff. So they might sound really assertive and scary. Just remember they all bluff. This is a paper tiger, and it only lasts as long as people haven't seen through the bluff. So they will crack heads, they'll put on big shows of force, but they all done as terror tactics. Governments are terrorists, and they basically cow. Since the dawn of time, they've cowed the people. So, when the rabble get rowdy, it's like Napoleon. When he was a corporal, he was a gunner, and his first real act of in the military was to use grape shot against the crowds during the French Revolution. So it's grape shot is a terror tactic to get the people off the streets. And so, but you have to read it from the other side. Everybody reads the rebel side and all the bad stuff that happens to the rebels. Read the other side. The guys are quaking in their fucking boots. They use terror and thank their lucky stars when the rebels stand down. And the rebels say, oh, this is, who can stand up against this might? It's almost anybody. You were almost there, but you gave in because you didn't realize that the guys were actually bluffing. You see the cannons probably have like a couple of shots of grape shot. They wouldn't load them. If the guys didn't go down in the first wave, they'd be on them. You could tear those soldiers limb from limb. But they trust that they will get you in the first go. And 99% of the time they're right, because everybody is sheep. But if they just knew what it was like on the other side, they would push their advantage and they would win every time. The advantage is always with the ants, right? The locusts are always bluffing. What they said in the Hollywood movies, like the ants movie, The Bug's Life, is that is exactly how it is. As soon as the ants see through the locust game, the game is over. It is a game of psychology, and it's all a game of can they make you stand down before you realize your own power. So that's the thing, and the other thing is you can't stop this going towards the totalitarian right. The left has just played such a bad game, and is just its own worst enemy. So there's it's going to be a right wing swing. Take heed, everybody on the left, LGBTQ people and stuff. Take heed. Is all the stuff you've achieved will be rolled back in a minute, because there's a backlash. Every action has an equal opposite reaction. It's a Newtonian thing. It's Newton's first law, right? So it's like, yeah, there will be a big backlash. So think of, get used to living under a totalitarian regime. There's not much different between the left and the right in terms of totalitarian regimes. They all look the same. They're all modeling on China. So China, is leading the way, and you can see how they are. But the major thing is that the people like their chains. They love their chains, and so the people will welcome it. They always do all this stuff. I mentioned about chipping you, and so people will welcome their chips because they'll be sold as convenience. They'll say you don't like the pesky thing on your phone, and it's such a nuisance. Well, we've got a new improved version. You can just get a chip and just walk into places and they'll show you, and everybody will love it. Oh, this is much easier. And that's how they'll get it. Like a few years before, you would have said, hey, come a few years down the road, you're going to be chipped. And they'd be like, oh, you conspiracy theorist, you tinfoil hat nutcase, they'd never do that. Nobody would stand for it. Yeah, they will, because they do it slowly. They boil the frog slowly. And everybody loves it because they get habituated, and they adapt, and they forget about the past. So all the past things, the echoes of people that say, no, you're selling out the freedoms we died for, those become a distant echo. People forget their freedoms, and people become relying, as Stockholm syndrome, they rely on the people that are terrorizing them. And as soon as Bolsonaro, all these guys, they know that the worse you make the situation, the more they cling to the state. So prepare for this world, because that's where we're headed for. So how do you resist? Is, for starters, you do things like we're doing now. You do things like organizations like Underground that resist. So a small tight-knit group is the worst nightmare for the state, because it's hard to penetrate, and they resist. It's people that think differently will tend to have their thinking reinforced as the government goes. So you will see it now. The more militant they get, militancy is a sign of desperation, and the more militant they get, the harder the opposition will get. So they instead of making everybody comply, they're hardening the opposition. So it's all good. They're hardening and radicalizing people, and driving them underground. All of these things are good. What you need to survive totalitarianism is large underground networks, informal networks, little networks of how you get things done. It's how everybody survived in the Soviet Union. They had little black markets, and little people that you could go to that could sort shit out. And so you get little underground SARs that are right in the middle of the apparatus, and they can give you the permit. They can, they show solidarity with you. Those are the people that do the most damage to the state, and do the most for the people. You don't want the state to be there when the collapse happens. We've talked about Threads, the thing. Go and have a look at that. Those guys in Threads were exactly what they'll do. You see, I mean, people in Britain are really complacent because they've had it good for a long time. But what was good about Threads was it showed people that you're living a dream. And go and have a look at the disaster. I tried to get Extinction Rebellion to do this, but they're too pro the system. They're all liberals, right? They're not really anti the system, so they wouldn't do it. But the best thing to do is to go and Rupert Reed actually agreed, is you go and look at the disaster plans. You go and demand the disaster plans in your county. And if you go and look at the disaster plans, the emergency management plans in your county, first of all, they're probably secret, but you can get the ones from, if they won't give them to you, Freedom of Information or anything like that, you can go and look at the Cold War ones, because those ones are available. And they haven't changed much since the Cold War. And see those things, they're grisly. One of the things in the UK that people don't realize is that the House of Lords, by the way, takes over in a disaster. If the central government fails, they send out the Lord to your, basically, just your, what's the name of Cornwall, or Duchy of Cornwall, or whatever. You will get this Lord who is probably a nutcase, and he will have absolute authority. I mean, absolute. I mean, he can summarily judge people and have them shot on the spot. He's judge, jury, and executioner, literally. That's the power he will have and so he will get in his his land yacht or Range Rover, and he will come to the county, and he can declare prima nocta rights on women. He can do what he fucking likes under those circumstances. I mean, I'm surprised the guys haven't engineered it just for fun. But I don't think people know that. They don't know what happens. I think they will think it's all rather nice, and people in, high-glow jackets come around to help you, and you get nurses and doctors and the army. Everybody wants the army. oh, the army must come in and drive the trucks and give the fuel and run the power stations. It's like, no, the army's there to fuck you up. That's all they're there for. They're a security detail to protect property rights, nothing else. The army does not do medical aid for civilians and shit. They're not going to waste their supplies on civilians, right? Go and have a look at the history. So the best thing that an organization like XR could do is to do some of those terror tactics. And the best terror tactics is to tell people what the state has in store for you when the shit hits the fan. That will wake people up because they think the government's on their side. But nothing shows you that the government is the worst enemy than seeing their emergency management plans, because they're drawn up in civilian times in peace, and they reveal the darkest side of these psychopaths, right? The powers they give themselves and the scenarios they run in their heads are just extraordinary. And the funny thing about it is they're so consistent all over the world. They dark, they're very, very bleak, and they so similar around the world. I think the best thing an anarchist can do is just let people know what the government has planned for an emergency, and that cures it. It's basically, you're not a liberal. You don't, after you've seen one of those plans, there's no way you're a liberal. You'll be a jittering wreck thinking, come on, seriously, this is what these guys are planning? You say, yeah, and here's the shitty thing, it's coming. There's no ways it's not coming, right? You have a look at the situation we're in, the collapse, overshoot, number of people that are being born every day. It's like there's no scenario I can see where this winds up as roses and permaculture and loving, sharing shit. It's just fantasy. So psychologically, preparing and being tough psychologically is
I put a link to the movie Thread on the comments, and I also put a link to one of the Rockefeller Guide for Strategic Disaster. But if you have any other, I think you had one, Hugh, that you posted a long time ago on Reddit, not a long time ago actually, that was very interesting, and I've lost it. It was also, I think it was also a Rockefeller thing on disaster plans. So if ever you have these things again, maybe you could send them to us or post them to us, because I think they are interesting to spread. A lot of people don't know about these things, and it can be a really eye-opening for liberals to look in the eyes of the beast.
Yeah, that one was the Rockefeller Institute, and it was forward planning. A lot of these think tanks, the CFR and stuff like that, does the Council on Foreign Relations and the WF, the World Economic Forum, and all the guys that meet in Davos. A lot of these, the RAND organization, the Bill and Hewlett Fund, Melinda Gates, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Hewlett Foundation, all these guys, the Ford Foundation, they all have think tanks that do forward planning. And nobody looks at them. You can go on the CFR's website and you can see them giving the marching orders to all these, apparatchiks and up-and-coming totalitarians. And if you read them, if you read the journal of the CFR, they're all guys from like Yale and Harvard and stuff. And they speak their mind, and it's extraordinary. And one of the extraordinary things is if you actually follow this literature, you can see it all rolls out. What they say happens 5 years later. They discuss it there, and then it happens. And then so you can see the Rockefeller Foundation one was interesting because they gave these, I think, 6 scenarios of where we'd be now, and they gave the one that all the activists want. We all go, we have a world that's in agreement, this kind of amicable thing. Basically, Carl Sagan's thing. Carl Sagan, at the end of his testimony to Congress in 1985, he said we need the world to be really amicable to survive what's coming in a way that it isn't now. And so that group of goody two-shoes scientists in particular, in that they wanted consensus. The IPCC thing was all designed for that. And so they expected the world to pull together to address all these problems. Now, that never happened. There was no will to do it. And so we never went to this scenario. I can't remember what it was called, the happy, the sunshine scenario. Now, it was named something like the sunshine scenario, and you assume, well, that's obviously the one that they were saying the Rockefeller Foundation was advocating for, this sunny future where everybody works together, we all get, transition to green energy and stuff like that. Well, no, we're in the scenario that they call lockstep. And lockstep is all brutal, a fragmented world, brutal shutdowns, totalitarian regimes, massive militarization against populations that are, unrest, ecotage, all of these things. It's actually absolutely where we are. Well, why didn't they go for the sunshine one? And it's in one of the lines. The reason why they thought the sunshine one was abhorrent was it said, national governments and the power brokers of today would have to give up their power. And what it said, the lockstep one was the only one where they clung on to power. So, of course, they took that one. And that's not obvious. You'd say, well, this is a shitty scenario. It's not for you. For them, it's the best one because it's the one where they hang on to power. And that's all they cared about. So in code, if you read it, you think I'm a liberal and you want it all, sugar and spice. But they're not liberals. They just want to hang on to their power. So they chose lockstep, and that's what. So very interesting to go back and look at all of those. But yeah, they lay it out because they do despise you. I mean, I saw this when I was a kid. And in fact, I think I even seen Downton Abbey things. I'm remarkably impressed by Downton Abbey, because it was so accurate to the world I knew. I knew that what they were saying, they got details right. And one of the remarkable details is their relationship to the serving staff at the dinner table, which I find was remarkable because it was the same as us, is we would discuss subjects that would be about, the coming revolution and whether we'd be murdered in our beds and stuff, while people were serving us. The black people we were talking were serving us. And we used to pretend that they were deaf and dumb, as if they didn't go to the kitchen and say, like, did you hear what those fucks just said? Which is, of course, what they did. But we didn't think of that. We thought of them as kind of as if they can't understand us, as if we're speaking a foreign language. And they had episodes in Downton Abbey where they had exactly that. There was one where the butler, they were talking about, the masses and, whether they would rise up. And then I think the butler snapped a glass. He got so frustrated, he snapped a glass in his hand because they were talking about the Bolsheviks and stuff. And he was a big patriot. But it was, that is how they think of it. I raise it because they think they can talk in front of us in open forum because we're so dumb. Here's the thing: we are so stupid. The sheep are so damn stupid that they can speak. They've known forever that they can speak openly in front of the children because the children are that fucking dumb. The children just can't believe their ears, and then they're not really listening. And so, but all the information is there at your fingertips if you just bother to listen. So you can hear everything. You can hear what state the Titanic is. You can hear how deep the water is and the hold, how close we are for the water closing over the deck. They don't hide it. They just trust that you're not listening, and no one is. Who has time for this shit? And anybody that runs around and says, "Hey, look what they're doing," in that they're pariah because they're telling the people bad news, and people are looking for things that make them feel good. So they have automatic protection saying that, oh, this is very, very dark, and say, well, as soon as you said it's dark, nobody's going to listen. But you can push it over the edge, right? Because the rumor mill is big. And so the thing I think what we should do now is with the Extinctionati is try and push the line that it's just try and make the whole thing go viral. and try and let as many people as possible kind of shove it down their throat that this is something you need to confront, and even if you decide it's complete bullshit, you'll never quite look at the world the same again. The thing that anything that rattles people's certainty is good, because it's from so many ways. But the thing is that people think the world is very stable, it's very robust, it's very predictable. And the exact opposite is true. Even the scientists, the climate scientists, geologists, they're staring it right in the face that the Earth is, it's non-linear, it's highly unstable, and exquisitely sensitive. And they don't believe it. They think it's robust, and this stuff is like, man, you can see that it's sensitive. It's written right there in front of you. But they think you can do anything to this planet, and it just bounces back. Lovelock and stuff, he done a tremendous disservice to everybody saying, no, this is a self-correcting system. It's like, yeah, like a spinning top. Yeah, and people also believe that it can't come unstuck. They believe the really dark things, like total annihilation of life, hot ass Earth or something, are impossible. Why? Because it's just such a thing. So, like, it's happened before. It's in the climate record, damn it. Look at the planets next. Look at Venus. What happened to Venus? It's like, you think we couldn't be Venus? It's like, you think there wasn't a population on Venus that didn't say, this could never happen to us. Venus is very robust. It's like, it might well have been. So people are too complacent. They're too conservative. They're too sure of themselves, and that's the hubris. That's the hubris that the Atlanteans are supposed to have been wiped out for. So anything that undermines people's certainty and belief, that's why I keep on going on about Kingsnorth these days. But you see, that kind of thing is fucking dangerous. That is pure evil, what he's doing there, with flirting with Christianity. And first of all, it's a lie, and second of all, it's opiates, it's comfort, and he's selling it. He's selling his opiates to people, and I wish he'd just shut the fuck up, because if everybody is smug, happy, and saved, we're in so much shit. We're better off that people are terrified, worried, uncertain, and believe nothing. And no one. Then you're in good shape. Then you can find your mates, and it's all about mutual support. Right? The only people that survive the flippening are people that are mutualists, right? Okay, it's easy to be an individualist if you think everything's stable, but it's only people that get through are the mutualists, right? So I want to go into I hope, Sophie, I hope you don't feel resistant about going into these scenarios to survive the flippening, because I think they're really useful for getting people prepped.
No, not at all. Not at all. I 100% agree with you. I mean, I think that we actually we need to talk about these things, and no, not at all. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's go through it in detail. Well, I mean, starting now and doing it for a long time. Make a ritual out of it. But I'll give you an example. Okay, let's take practical examples. So I was trying to say that the way I see it, and please come up with your own theories, because the more the merrier. It's a great discussion point. But the way I see it is, you've got three things to survive. You've got to survive the flippening. Then you have to survive severe cold and volcanic winter for maybe 5 to 15 years. And then you have to survive real heat, maybe hot house Earth. So from -15, you probably have to go to 6 degrees above today.
And nuclear power station.
Yeah, maybe radiation too. So the radiation is long term, and I think the only thing you can do is stay away from power stations and work now to stop them building more. But you don't want to be downwind of a power station. Nuclear power station. Most of the nuclear power stations are in the northern hemisphere. It'll take quite a long time for radiation to get down to the southern hemisphere. So the Hadley cells and stuff keep the atmosphere quite contained and dust contained. There are models. You can go and look at how aerosols circulate. And the NASA has some models, active models. So all of this stuff, you can find out a hell of a lot and model a hell of a lot. One of the things you need to find out is where the droughts are in the cold and the heat, and you'll be surprised. So the middle of continents is a very bad place to be because of the temperature ranges. So it's the range of temperature that kills off vegetation. So I did post one of these things where the models actually showed pretty much what Mount Pinatubo actually did. So the cooling matched, and you say like one of the good places to be is where I am right now. Europe is not bad. After the volcanic winter, the Arctic will get very hot, and I've often been very suspicious of Putin and all this drive for the Arctic. So all this mobilization for the Arctic, it looks like crazy shit. It's like, if you know the Arctic is going so quickly, why do this neo-colonial grab for the Arctic? And the thing is, I think they're thinking post-apocalypse. So you probably want to stay away from the Arctic for the action. But then afterwards, in the heat and stuff, when the heat hits, about a few years later, you probably want to head for the Arctic. So you must think in terms of movement. So you can't hunker down. So anyway, I'm talking about strategies. The preppers and the guys that go into bunkers, like those guys are doomed. So even the military guys that want to go down in a Fort Cheney and have nuclear batteries and have plants that they grow under artificial light and stuff, those guys are not going to be in good shape because they have to come out at some stage. Right?
You mentioned something this morning that was very interesting in that line. Sorry to budge in, but it just came into my, you were saying that there was on islands on the Pacific and other places, there are little huts that are built by probably sailors who just leave a place, a shelter, so that they can have a place to stay. And I think in this kind of mentality scenario making that we're doing there, I think, and the fact that we need to be more or less nomadic, or at least semi-nomadic if an event like that happens, I think it would be very interesting to think in terms of having, like, when you're a kid and you build a base, those kind of little shelters that are there for you, but for others too. They're on a path. I think those would be part of a very interesting thing to include in networks and underground networks that people know, and not the bunker mentality, but on the opposite, actually, a kind of an open place where that there are different options depending on what scenario unfolds.
So this is where I'm going. You're preempting where I want to take all of this. So this is a vision I see for the Extinctionati, and that you have a worldwide network of people that have the same egregore, think the same way, and our aim is to survive this, but you hedge your bets. Everybody is around the world with different strategies and different views of how this unfolds, but you're not secretive about the fact that this is where you are, this is what you're doing. Now that's absolutely contrary to the prepper mentality. If you say, look at Canadian prepper or any one of those kind of guys, they always think in terms of keeping people away. So there was one horrific episode that shocked even the Canadian prepper YouTube guy, where he said, what would you do in these scenarios? If some guy comes to the door asking for food, he looks a bit like an anarchist. I think he actually used the A word. And he said, you've seen the guy around, maybe eyeing your daughter or something like that. And then he comes to the door. You think he might be sussing out maybe scouting the reconnoiter on your property to maybe do how do you handle it? Do you give him food? I think it was astonishing. I think like 25% of his viewership said they would give him food and poison him. He said that wasn't a very good strategy because the guy's probably got mates and they're going to come to you for that. But just that attitude, I would write those guys off with an F. They're not going to survive. They're preppers, and then I would put them as high, right at the top of the list of people that will not survive, somewhere close to people in ICUs and stuff like that. And the reason is, if you're thinking that way of survival, I can tell you cannot survive with absolute certainty. What a lot of the guys said, well, I would just rack the slide, stick a gun in the guy's face and tell him to bugger off. That too, even the Canadian prepper guy said that not what you want to do, because you've just announced that you have resources and stuff to protect and stuff like that. So it's like, how are you supposed to survive those situations? And I'll tell you, it's basically you let people know, you feed them. So you say, well, if I have a little stash in like Panama or Guatemala or somewhere, and I have a little cave and a little bug out thing, and I've sussed it out, and I think I can survive a flipping there and stuff, publish it. So, but you say, well, but you might get 200 refugees at the door, and you might only have food for your family for 3 weeks. I say, give the 200 people the food, invite them in, give them the food. You will be better off. 200 people can look after each other. Say, I have food. It's only a little bit, and say, if 200 people make it across the fucking ocean to your bug out thing, you want those people. Those fuckers are survivors. Those 200 people will look after each other. They will survive. They have survival potential. So do not think in terms of turning people away from the door. If you go down and collapse and you give away your last crust of bread, that's fucking good. Be prepared to give it away and starve to death. What's more likely to happen is they will reciprocate. So you've got to get into the mode of reciprocate. So you just be absolutely selfless.
Yeah, like my thought with the survival is it's not up to me. It's up to other people, really, and circumstance. Yeah, like the whole
that's a very good attitude.
The individualist idea, I just completely disagree with, because we're social animals. Like if you look at primates and wolves and stuff, they do not survive well alone. And so honestly, it gets me thinking about the fates and stuff. It's yeah, it's just my survival will be dependent mostly on other people, because I sure shit don't know how to survive without the system. So, and I'm all for sharing.
Yes.
If some stranger, even if a neo-Nazi knocked at my door, I'd share food with them. I can see beyond that bullshit. They're people just like me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if he's a well-armed neo-Nazi, you probably want him as your mate, because
Yeah.
you can probably fend off for the saber-toothed cats or something that suddenly make a comeback. But yeah, you will not be able to predict what to prepare for, right? So you don't know that there are going to be plagues of king rats or locusts, or maybe the polar bears will thrive in the new environment and terrorize the landscape. In those cases, you really want a tribe. There's the ways of how we've survived as humans is our tribal instinct. So all this thing about, we must all care and share, and can't we have a united, loving world, and imagine with the Beatles and stuff, all that stuff is poison. You really want tribes and disparate tribes. The fact that they beat each other up occasionally and do raiding parties is that's how we survived. It's called hedging your bets. So you've got to embrace our evil side. We're not broken, right? We're not broken, people that this liberal dream that you can all be pacifists and get on. It's doomed. It's a doomed ideal, and you wouldn't want it. You wouldn't want to live in that world, that syrupy, saccharine world where it's like horrible, horrible world, man. It's like,
Yeah,
that's not us.
yeah, it's like that. I see this saying that's always like misinterpreted. It's that one where, the two wolves are fighting in everyone's heart and which one wins, the one you feed. It's like, no, you have to feed both of them because if you don't feed the dark one, he will come after you.
Yeah. Yeah. So all these kind of get all this Waterworld and Mad Max and stuff scenarios out of the way is, if you go and look at a good collapse scenario, 1174, there was a nice collapse. All the guys that really made out like bandits were bandits. They were the sea peoples. So go and look at the sea peoples. All the states collapsed except maybe Egypt and possibly Syria. But they all collapsed under some great cataclysm that people are not really sure what they are, but it could have been volcanism. So just have a look. But
well, if you listen at the moment, somewhat some liberals are saying, and in the media, they are absolutely afraid of tribalism. They are actually denouncing tribalism, this new fear that, these new things that are appearing. They don't like it, and whether right or left, I've heard a lot of talks where that word is demonized totally, and so they know that that's where that's the antidote to globalism.
Yeah, it, yeah, they're just the liberals love their chains, like you guys said. Yeah, they don't like seeing people break away from the mind control.
Well, we're too monolithic in terms of genetics and culture. So we have a monoculture and we monogenetic. So we too closely related genetically. We went through a population bottleneck, I think, at the last flippening, and and so we don't have enough genetic diversity. So we need diversity. So they all say about celebrating diversity and stuff. Well, it's like, yeah, but they want to subsume diversity. So they want to celebrate diversity by knackering it, by basically emasculating it and quarantining it and making it safe, so that it's, oh, you can be different in as long as it's not threatening to the whole system. And so, like, no, you've got to allow people their differences. It's one of the things where I actually agree with the far right on. Don't agree with much with the far right, but the far right in general, they kind of say, we don't deny people their differences, we just want them separate. Now that's horrendous to liberals on this trip that we all go, progress on the right side of history and stuff, which is all bogus. You want people like that in tribes. The reason why we survive diseases is because the diseases wiped out only a tribe or two in this local little conurbation. But if you're too connected and your genetics is not diverse enough, you'll be wiped out by disease. That's what's happening now. That's what the lesson that nobody's taking from this pandemic. What the pandemic's trying to tell you is that too many people, they're too closely connected, and they're moving too fast. So it's saying, slow down, segregate, tribalize, and have more barriers. It's kind of the anti-anarchist thing. Anarchists say, well, we should have no borders. Yeah, because people need to move around, but we shouldn't have no tribes. Right? That's a bit of a mistake. That's not a good lesson from Paleolithic times. That from the
Well, the nomadic people are very bent on maintaining their tribes among them. The various cultures, and the one I know particularly, the Bedouins, they have kept them through thousands of years, even though they are nomadic, even though they are a people. They've kept this structure, and they're totally lawless. They're totally without any respect for authority, police, borders, anything like that. But the structure of the tribe is their lifeline.
Yeah, or throughout human cultures, in all cultures around the world, there are things like they have strict laws of moiety and who you can marry and stuff. So the laws of moiety are amazing if you've never come across them. It's in Australasian tribes and Papua New Guinea and stuff. They have these laws of moiety, which they're incredibly complex about who you can marry in terms of relatives, and so they look at the patterns, and the guys know the patterns instinctively, but it took mathematicians to work out what they were doing. And then, these ancient people from like 60,000 years ago figured out how to make sure you have the most genetic diversity. And that's what the laws of moiety are to do, is to make sure that you match people that are genetically most distant from each other. And so incredible ritual. I don't think the guys know themselves the reasons for it. They just know that it's super important. And it's the way we've survived disease. The whole point of sexual dimorphism and stuff is to protect you from disease. It's to provide an ever-moving target for diseases. So part of the reason why I would speculate, and this is not official, this is not, I don't think epidemiologists and stuff would agree, but my theory is that the reason why we've got such a long break from when we should have been having, ever since globalism. Globalism started in about 1900, right? The first globalism. We've had an amazing run of luck from epidemics, which epidemiologists can't explain. Well, I think I can explain it, and that you get a reprieve for a while because of the genetic diversity, so that people are tribal enough and genetically diverse enough that a novel virus can't actually make headway against this novel immune system and immune response in foreign places. So there's this kind of foreign immunity. And then as people travel and you get mixed marriages and the gene pool gets blended, then the diseases can make headway. So now the world population is becoming thoroughly blended, so much so that anthropologists are seeing a closing window on looking at Earth's genetic history, because it's being stirred up with, just since the invention of one trip invented the jet or the passenger airline. So since the invention of the passenger airline, there's been such a mix-up of genes. It started slowly in the 1900s with ships and stuff. But I think that is stirred up the gene pool and blended it to the point that some virus can, like a SARS virus, can take root and get a clear run, as if it's just taking a run through it. So it's, in other words, the cost of a global village is annihilation by pandemic. And what kept us going for 200,000 or 300,000 years is the fact that we were in villages that, if they were exposed to a deadly disease, the disease died out in 1 or 2 villages. It couldn't actually spread. And what can happen now is it can spread, and when it gets to a new place, it says, I've seen your T-cell makeup, I've seen your genetics before. It's just like that, the guy in like Japan or something is like, and you say like, well, I'm American Japanese. Yeah, same genetics. Anyway, I've got you. I can read your number. So again, this is, by the way, a lesson also for authoritarians, is you have to escape diseases the same way you escape authoritarians, and it's by being random. So the more random our genetics is, the more random our behavior is, and the more heterogeneous it is, the more chance you have of evading pathogens, and the state is a pathogen. So the state is a hegemon and a pathogen, just like the virus. The two are remarkably similar when you actually look at them. And so really the government is really fighting competition from the virus. They're basically the same, and you can see they're the same. Look at Big Pharma. Big Pharma is on the virus side. It's making money out of it. The virus is making copies of itself, and Big Pharma is making copies of itself. So the two are in cahoots. They're allies. But the way around them is the same around totalitarians, is to be random. You see, what they're in a competition to make sure that they can make you predictable and then controlled. So if they do any of these things like passports or any one of the measures, you want to make sure that you make it difficult and you're random, so you don't fit in. You make it very hard for them. So everybody must be an exception. They want everybody to be conform. So the way around is to be an exception. The more exceptions they have, the more expensive it comes to run. It's all about making the system cheap to run. So all of these things are to run, totalitarian authority as cheap as you can. And so the point of view for rebels and reactionaries against it is to raise the price of their totalitarianism and their violence. So the easiest thing is to get you to be self-censoring. You see, what they're doing now is they're getting companies and corporations to do their dirty work for them. They're getting restaurants to police, jab status and stuff like that. So you see that you want everything to be ambiguous. You want the restaurateurs, everybody to try and be exceptions. And eventually they have to do their own dirty work. They can't, rely on other people. But the cheapest and easiest form of control is violence and terror. So that's why they use it. They terrorize you with fines, they terrorize you with uniforms, they terrorize you with brutality. And all of it is to make the authoritarianism cheaper. So you just have to find a way of making it more expensive. So if they put some guy in a uniform, make sure that he runs around doing useless shit all the time. So they always say this. They say this to XR. They say, you're wasting police time. There's knife crime in London. These police could be actually policing useful stuff like knife crime. And no one ever says, no, I want to waste police crime. I want to make policing very, very expensive. And yeah, the more knife crime, the better. Because basically it's costing the government money. And if the government has to raise money, they're parasites, so they raise money with taxes. The more taxes they squeeze out of the population, the more pissed off the population gets, and the sooner they revolt. So there are two ways they tax you, right? Inflation and raw taxation. So they nickel and dime you with fees and all of this stuff, and and then inflation. So they're taxing us heavily with both, and so you're seeing now, currency inflation is turning into price inflation in the shops. All of this is good. All of this is making the public disaffected and causing a wedge between the authoritarians and the people. Now that wedge has to be driven as deep as possible, because when the shit hits the fan, inevitable, unavoidable, you want those authoritarians to be as weak, ineffectual, and distant as possible. So, but yeah, going back to the mutualism of survivalism, unless anybody's got something they wanted to say.
Yeah, it's like you said in the Eastern meeting, like if the government steps in, they're going to screw up your ability to do mutual aid. They're not going to let you do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an act of resistance. Every, self-reliance and who wrote that? Emerson. See, that's subversive. The government needs you to be reliant on them. It's exactly as they say in the V movie. Is the Chancellor says, they need to be reminded why they need us, and that is the truest thing. That is the gold standard for every totalitarian. Is they need it's the mafia, it's the Cray twins, all of these guys. They need the public to need them, right? The Nazis went to excessive trouble to make sure that the public needed them. It's an act of resistance, just like they need to be paternalistic and maternalistic, but it's an act of resistance to be independent. So if you can remove any one of the intermediaries between you and the sources of your survival, that's an act of resistance. If you can take people out of the chain of the stuff that you need, like think how many people are in the chain for your food. The next time you put a bit of food in your mouth, ask yourself, how many intermediaries were there that touched this food? If it's processed food, it's an extraordinary amount. You have a look at the fucking packaging. You don't be surprised if the raw materials were grown in Peru, they were sent for packaging in Malaysia, and they came to you. They were, you went to a retail store like a distribution center. Then Vons picked them up. It was so they they were shipped by probably Costco in China in a container. They went to a refrigeration plant. They went to a mass distribution place. They went to a local distribution center, and then they went to a store. And then you pick them up. You think, okay, there's the guys that grew the thing. There's the guys that, how many farmers and laborers were on that farm for that produce? The guys that made the packaging and work in a plastic factory. The guys that shipped the raw materials out to Malaysia. The guys that packed it. The guys that put the label on. The guys that that ran the ship, that got it to you. There's an army of people between you and this fucking pear sauce in this little container. So you say, the more people there in that chain, the more fragile it is, and the more likely they are to go away. So the state needs that long chain to be intact. And they need it as long as possible. You see, if everybody is enmeshed in that chain, then they're holding people literally in chains. Now, if the person can get to their own pears immediately out of the garden, there are no intermediaries. The government's in trouble because you don't need them, right? And if you don't need them, then the whole thing falls apart. So they're continually doing stuff to make sure that you need them. That's the problem with socialized medicine. All of them, they're all trying to find excuses. That's the problem with the left. Is they're licensing the state to be an intermediary, and they actually want to be mothered. They want diaper socialism, and they want to be mothered. Then they wonder why they get put in gas chambers. It's like they called national socialists not because it's name only. It's because that's what they fucking are. National socialists are national socialists, and they got to the gas chambers. How? Through socialism. Right? Why? It's remarkable that there's still staunch anarchists that think it's compatible with socialism. Anarchism is not compatible with socialism. Socialists are communists or national socialists. That's all. That's all there is. They are intermediaries. There's no way to. Socialism is not mutualism. Socialism is the state apparatus making sure it's an intermediary between you and the stuff you need. And so the more the intermediaries you have, the more fragile the system, the more it has to be maintained, protected, and taxed. And so it's a burden. It's a huge burden, and it doesn't distribute wealth. So it's like the National Socialists. All these guys, go and look at Schindler's List. He makes out like the government, like a bandit, because he has cheap socialized workers, right? You don't distribute wealth through the state. The state isn't capable of distributing wealth because it has to grow. If it starts distributing wealth, it'll hamper its growth prospects. If its growth prospects are hampered in any way, the GDP goes down and the government will be overthrown or it'll be overrun by some other state next door. So it just doesn't fucking work. You got to get rid of this ideology. This state system doesn't work. Industrialism doesn't work. Socialism is a child of industrialism. It's a red-headed stepchild that cannot work. So you've got to get rid of all of this shit in an emergency fashion. So you should be praising everybody laments the wrong stuff. In Britain, they all lament the passing of the NHS and stuff. Well, you shouldn't lament the passing of the NHS. You should celebrate it. And then don't celebrate immediately you're going to get privatized medicine, which is much worse, by the way. But you don't want privatized medicine, and you don't want socialized medicine. Both of those are intermediaries. And if you need the industrial system to support you, you're going to be in trouble. We're in overshoot, damn it. This game is not going to go on for much longer. You've just been given 1,000 fireball warning by this pandemic, and you've just seen the supply shocks. So this is fair warning of what's coming. What's wrong with people that they want more government, more socialism? Just showing you what happens. The supply shocks are because of the intermediaries. You see, the intermediaries are handing all these goods down this long chain, hand to hand, like a bucket brigade. So economists learn in college that those bucket brigades, you can break a healthy bucket brigade just by psychology. Just if there's ever a panic or there's ever a hiccup in supply and demand, is you get oversupply and a hiccup that goes all the way down to the manufacturer. The manufacturer overproduces, and then they can't warehouse the stuff and they go bust. That's taught to economic students, that supply shocks and stuff can be fatal for no reason. There was a supply shock in 2008 that was unnoticed in the rice market, and it almost brought down all Asian governments left and right. And it was entirely psychological. There was panic, broke down for no reason in like Vietnam and India, and then soon all these governments started hoarding rice, and there was a run on the rice market. There was no rice shortage, but it was just a supply shock. It's just like, a run on toilet paper during a pandemic.
Well, yes, during the beginning of the lockdowns, there was a shortage of flour in the supermarkets because people had thought, won't get bread, we buy flour, etc. And there wasn't a shortage of flour. There was a shortage of little packets of flour. It was the packaging that was the problem, because they were not prepared for people to rush on that. You could get plenty of big bulk products from various places, but it was just the packaging.
But one of the things that I find very remarkable is I would have predicted that more companies would have gone bust. So they're keeping companies afloat by just pumping money into them. But you see, one of the things they describe in those supply shocks is what takes companies down is that a lot of these, especially retail companies, they're running on very thin margins, like Vons and stuff, as Albertsons and all these, Sainsbury's and stuff. They have very thin margins, like 3% and stuff like that. So what happens is they get a signal from the market saying that for some accidental reason, there's a big demand, say demand doubles suddenly. Now, what happens is they all carry excess inventory. So they send orders up the chain. So the supermarket says, oh, we ran out of flour in a day. So it's like, okay, well, we need a week's supply. So they put in an order for 5 times what they normally do. Then that goes to the wholesaler. The wholesaler then says, okay, we warehouse 5. Everybody's ordering 5 times as much. So we order 5. And so you've got 25 times as much ordered by the wholesaler. Then it goes all the way down the chain. So you eventually get to the manufacturer and they go like, oh, well, I better go and borrow some money and tool up because now I've got like 100 times the order. If they do that, they're going to be in severe trouble because as soon as the supply shock is gone, then they've bought inventory and hired people and, laid out capital, expecting a ramp up in production that never comes. Then eventually the excess filters down the chain, and everybody takes a fucking year for all this excess inventory to filter through to the store and the end of the chain where the consumer picks it up. In the meantime, the manufacturer's baffled. They say, like, how did we go from like 100 times what we normally do to 0? And so that's what kills them, because they can't survive until the supply chain renormalizes. So they go bust. And then you have a real problem, because then, the original manufacturer or some guy in the chain is out of business. Then everybody's really fucked. And that hasn't happened so far. But by rights, it should. At the moment, it's all just, containers and logistics and a bit of a muddle. But yeah, they've managed to paper over the cracks in the capital markets, and the fact that people have not, they should be all ramping up and for supply and doing all this excess, which will work its way through the system. So we haven't seen all that yet, and I think that I'll be amazed if it doesn't come. But you should be seeing loads of places going bankrupt, far more than now. And then if you remember that all of this house of cards is predicated on the derivatives market, that's 5 quadrillion, right? So 5 quadrillion in derivatives is like $30 on every dollar, real dollar in the market on side bets. Those side bets are all going to fail. So there should be a massive financial collapse. I haven't seen it yet, but you know, this Jenga tower is teetering like crazy. So I can't see us getting through this without precipitating the financial collapse, because the financial collapse came before COVID, right? Just repeat that over 1,000 times. The financial collapse that they started QE for was in January. Pandemic started in February at most, maybe March in 2020. So don't forget that. They were unrelated, right? So don't think all the problems you're seeing in the global markets are related to the pandemic. They exacerbated by it, but they started before. So that alone is enough for conspiracy. It's just so fucking convenient. It's so convenient. It ranks right.
Yeah, that was the crisis in the repo markets, wasn't it? The year before, and then all the bank lending.
There's a banking crisis. There is a fiscal crisis going down. The Deutsche Bank and stuff is bankrupt. All of the banks are bankrupt. So so far they've managed to patch it up with extraordinary, absolutely unprecedented in the history of the world, quantitative easing. But that quantitative easing has to be reflected in inflation at some point, and so people are going to be devastated. So yeah, this I don't think the story winds up smoothing out. It's a giant Ponzi scheme, and as Mike Kaiser says, you can't taper a Ponzi scheme, and so I think this might be the end of the Ponzi scheme. But yeah, the financial thing is more important than any of this. Everybody's whistling through the graveyard. But this is so convenient for the banks that it ranks right up with Donald Rumsfeld admitting to Congress that the Pentagon lost over $1 trillion that went unaccounted for in the military budget. That was the day before 9/11. So Donald Rumsfeld was testifying about $1 trillion loss, which was going to be the biggest story in the world. And the next day was 9/11. Was like, and nobody mentioned that $1 trillion ever again. It's like, whoa, is Donald Rumsfeld the luckiest fuck that ever walked on this planet, or is that just too much of a coincidence? But anyway, the same applies to the banks. It's like right when they were on the ropes, they had this bloody reprieve, absolute reprieve. It's like, come on, dude, this is not. Oh, come on, like the next month is like, oh, come on, you just come on. It's like you just. How can you not be a conspiracy theorist? I just don't get it. It's all too.
Yeah, I gotta admit that when the pandemic started, and I was pretty early doors on realizing how big it was going to be, I must admit the first thing I thought, because I sort of had one foot in trying to sort of, just as a side hobby, just following financial news and the gold bugs and all of the things you've talked about, that I had a hunch straight away. I actually jokingly said, oh, you know what this is? This is to get rid of all the old people because they can't afford their pensions, But, I mean, it is incredible how convenient it all is. I'm not, I'm somewhere in the middle. I think there's definitely, with the conspiracy theories, it's healthy to be like, there's some truth in some things, but you don't want to be completely one side. But it is just crazy. Like when you listen to a lot of the people like Catherine Austin Fitts and a lot of the kind of libertarian real money guys, a lot of them don't say it so much. Some of them do, some of these YouTubers and things, but you can tell they're connecting dots that most people just haven't got a Scooby-Doo about. And there's, I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to say there's like some grand plan, but it's like they must have top shelf plans that they go, oh look, here's a crisis, right? Now we can roll this out, and yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, it's hard to pin down, so you don't want to get too tinfoil hat, but it's worth just keeping at the back of your mind, because the universe does conspire to be amazingly like a badly written play. Basically you think, who wrote this shit? This is completely unconvincing. It's such a hack. So it does. There are amazing coincidences and stuff in history, but I always think your first, you should always go for conspiracy before coincidence, because that's what history shows. It's just, if you go and uncover history, that you see that it's just wall-to-wall conspiracies. And you need to do a thorough look at history. It doesn't pay to look at history superficially. If you do a thorough look, and I mean, you try to put yourself in the sandals of somebody in that day and time, and try and understand what they're thinking, and why they do the shit that they do, and eventually you get to a point where you really, really feel you can understand what it was like to be at a time and place. And then what always turns out was they would never, ever have believed the truth of what we now teach in Orthodox history. The people at the time would not have believed you. They would have utterly dismissed you as a nutcase if you had told them what now kids are taught as standard in school. So all the stuff that goes down, people just don't believe it. It doesn't fit with their worldview. So that's worth remembering. So what I'm saying is, it's not always possible to nail down what the conspiracy is, but you must never, ever lose sight of the fact that there is a conspiracy. You might not be able to tell what it is, but there's absolutely, the liberal view that there's no conspiracy is wrong. It's absolutely demonstrable by just going back in history and saying, like, they all thought there was no conspiracy, and now we take it as read. Just everything, every fucking thing. I mean, it's a long litany. You just go and look at the sinking of the Lusitania, or look at they completely manufactured the Gulf of Tonkin incident just so they could go to war in Korea. It's like just over and over again. Just the whole of history is, just look at the murder of Dag Hammarskjöld and stuff, which, by the way, South Africa had a hand in. I mean, yeah, it's just over and over again. South Africa killed Samora Machel, and the president of Mozambique. All of these things go down. The CIA is absolutely rogue organization. It's absolutely, it's the B team. The NSA and stuff is worse, but the CIA is absolutely out of control, and so.
Yeah, they're the CIA. I love this saying, this abbreviation. One of them's called the CIA Capitalism's Invisible Army. That's just the perfect name for a conspiracy right there. Which, yeah.
Yeah, no president or something can cross the CIA. They'll all they admit it. They
invented the term conspiracy theory, didn't they? Who was talking about that the other day? Was that us? I don't know. Yeah, I heard it. Like, they were the guys that set that seed, to sort of label anyone that was coming up with other stuff. Yeah, you said that. So it's and to conspire, what's the definition? It's a group of individuals, getting together and hatching a plan, or to enact some change of some sort, but it's the way it's been seeded in the public's mind. It's like this propaganda word. It's so powerful how the media just grab these and they just pump these labels, and that's such a simple thing, but people just immediately they hear that and they just associate that with anything that is just whack job, and it's just
I mean, look at Alan Dulles and his term in the CIA, and all the hits they did on Castro, and like 50 failed attempts. So a lot of the guys like Oliver Stone say, well, one of the arguments against the Kennedy assassination and CIA connection is that like the CIA fuck everything up, and Kennedy assassination went flawlessly. So that's the one thing that makes people think in the know think it wasn't the CIA, because they fuck everything up. But I think they definitely had a hand in it, and the Secret Service had a hand in it. But I think it was because it was on home soil that they actually did quite a good job. But yeah, Duluth and those people came up with the idea of a conspiracy theory as a pejorative. So like anything that's abnormal. So it's like, but it gets to the point of ridiculousness. So it's like, you're a 9/11 conspiracy theorist because, like 19 hijackers just taking over 4 civilian airliners and flying them into buildings is just an everyday occurrence. So don't get all woo about it. It's like, where are you coming from? It's like, this is such an extraordinary thing. And they're like, but a conspiracy behind it is too much for you. It's like, what it's just like, no, it's an ordinary fucking Tuesday afternoon. What the fuck are you talking about? Or you nutcase. It's like, what? What's normal about the Kennedy assassination? It's just so fucking extraordinary. It opens the door to anything. Except liberals go, boom, ooh, dangerous, scary, shut doors. Because, but you got to get over that shit, because it didn't used to matter in the 60s and 70s. It's kind of academic, but you see, living in these regimes, you have to second guess them. This is what we had to do in South Africa. It's really fucking important, because you need to read the government, read what they're doing, read their intentions, and because you have to make plans like to get out of the draft and to avoid all these really sucky situations. So you need to be well ahead of the game, and they always telegraph. Once you learn to read them, the thing that stops people reading them is they trust them. But as long as you know that everything they say, they open their mouth, it's bullshit and propaganda. As soon as you get that, you're in the ballpark of actually reading.
I mean, the most disappointing thing, I think, when you look at now and how the public and everybody is just like so compliant and believing everything that they're told, I think the most frustrating thing is that we saw this all before, years ago with the Snowden revelations, and it was all laid bare, and people didn't bat an eyelid, barely anyone. Yeah, there was a few protests, and that led to kind of, and then we had the Wall Street protests after the financial crisis, but people just kind of, just didn't really do much in the end. It was just like, okay, just click back to reality, click back to normal, and not that fussed. And a lot of people just said, oh well, I'm not a terrorist, it doesn't matter, I don't mind the government just like looking at everything I do, and they're just hoovering up all this data on us. Like, why do you trust them? It's just crazy. I don't understand why people can't see that it's not verbatim what I tell you. It's not all truths, it's clearly not.
Well, a lot of it's Stockholm syndrome, but I believe one of the new developments in this story is that what the authoritarians have come to realize is there's a certain protection in the more outrageous things are. So, in other words, the more devious, outrageous thing that they do, the more people will internalize it, normalize it. So if you give people a steady feed of outrage, they get habituated to it. Now everybody expects. So there was a time that I think I can even remember where the governments tried to avoid scandal. If you look at, say, the Profumo affair, Christine Keeler and Mandy Rice Davis and all of that, the public would be shocked and the governments would fall and people would lose their jobs. What they've been finding over the years is that people, it becomes such a steady stream of outrage that they've normalized outrage and they can move on to the second stage. So people's emotions have been blunted, This is one of the things that Fult is making a huge mistake on. He thinks that, you know, we're in the Gandhi era, and as when the world sees, you know, kids' heads being broken open and they see blood on the streets, and then you will expose the government, and, you know, there'll be outrage and people will run onto the streets with this moral outrage. Say, well, there's not a drop of moral outrage left in the public. They've been drained of it systematically by just this deluge of stuff that is morally outrageous. So they've normalized evil, and so nobody's going to say this is beyond the pale, is it? Everybody's going to say, well, I knew it was like that. Swipe left. And so it's far more. They found that out. Sarkov and those guys found that out. I mean, I use a technique too, just on XRMed. If you give people a barrage of bad news, you anesthetize them. So it's you numb them, and it's to their advantage, because if they just think, oh, this is, you know, you won't surprise me. It can't, you know, I believe it can get much worse than this. It's, you know, that's a huge boon. If they can set that expectation in the population, that's a huge boon to totalitarians. And so they've been using it. They've been using it for a while. It's like, put out the bad news. And so there are no scandals anymore. It's like they found that, you know, look at Prince Andrew and stuff like that, and all the stuff with Epstein. And you can't shock anybody with that stuff anymore. So they go, this is great. You know, we can do fucking anything, you know. And so they get to their fuck a pig moment in public. So where this all ends up is they will eventually get to a thing where a sitting prime minister fucks a pig in parliament just to prove to everybody that basically you cannot touch me. I am an untouchable. Why? Who else could fuck a pig in parliament and get away with it? And so that's where the emperors went to. That's where the Roman emperors went to. They went to a place where was saying they would deliberately do stuff that was so outrageous to prove to the population that they were absolute power. They had absolute power, because they say, like, here I'm doing the absolute taboo thing, which would make grandma faint, and I'm getting away with it. What you gonna do? And it's like, there. And once the public, you know, doesn't react to that fuck a pig in parliament moment, that's it. They have absolute and utter control over you, because there is no moral outrage left.
So then, maybe you can tie it up for us. So if all the outrageous things that are being done do not elicit emotion or shock in us, how does that stack up against our like our ideal for people to resist? If nothing shocks us anymore, will resistance just be, how does that tie up with resisting if we're not shocked at what's going on? We're just numb and accepting things.
No, so what? When this happens, you can always one up people on shock. So traditionally what happens is in Sun Tzu, and the extinctionati, the flippening and everything, the aim is to put people on dead ground. So what happened in, you see, this is all stuff that people have known since the beginning of civilization. Is particularly, say, the Romans got to the stage where the troops would be dumbstruck by an entrenched enemy, say, an intractable enemy. And that's where the term decimation comes from. Decimation was they would line up all their troops if they were defeated, and that they would kind of get into a state of helplessness and apathy. The way they would shock them out of it is, they used this a few times, but the Roman army feared decimation for sure. What they would line their troops up, pick out every man and execute him, and then send the rest back in a battle. And that would normally shock them out of it. But the standard technique is Sun Tzu, where you put the troops on dead ground. So at some point, you have to burn the bridges, and then people are like, okay, we've got no hope. We're dead. You say, yeah, okay, we are absolutely dead. We are defeated. We're dead. You say like, so what are you going to do for the rest of the afternoon? Have tea or wait for them to fuck you up the backside or mutilate you or torture you? Or say like, or do you want to just like out of spite, just stick it to them? And most people will go like, oh, fuck it. If I'm dead, I'm going to take one or two down of those fuckers with me. And then that's, if the enemy has an escape route, then they won't fight as hard as people that are on dead ground. So if you put people on, you see, the problem with climate change and all of this stuff is people have options. They all say, so the scientists are criminals because they conspired. Literally, I watched them. I read all in the. I watched them conspire together. They conspired in open forum in Nature and New Scientists, and they had this debate during the fucking 80s and 90s, where they said, how do we communicate this climate and ecological disaster to the public? And there was two schools of two camps, and the one school said, well, we're scientists, just tell them the fucking truth. And the other ones were politicians in lab coats. And they said, no, all the research shows, and they jump out all the papers where the psychologist shows that if you tell people the truth about the ecological disaster, they get apathetic, and then they won't do anything about climate change. So this was utterly wrong from so many angles. But the worst angle is that they went beyond their mandate because we didn't pay scientists to be our parents and to manipulate the message. We paid them to do science and report science accurately. Then they took it on themselves. They conspired in print. They reached a consensus as they could because they were all on the liberal left and they were all sucking on the government teat. They reached a very convenient consensus, and that's you sell everybody opium. So everything has to be framed in their options. It's never too late. Never stop the hope, because if people give up, what they told themselves was the science says, psychology, psych studies says that if you tell people the truth and they lose hope, then they give up and they don't do any climate action. What the second thing that's completely wrong about this is that it's a false assumption to assume that people do climate action. So it's this liberal, unquestioned liberal piece of horseshit that if people know the truth, they will all come together and we'll all act as a consensus, and the consensus will change things. And say, that's a fucking lie. No one ever went and questioned that and said, does the consensus translate to a reduction in greenhouse gas, for example? No one did that. To this day, no one has shown what the Mauna Loa has shown us, that greenhouse gas does not go down as consensus goes up. So as people awareness went up of greenhouse gases and all of that, CO2 went up exponentially. So it's like, it's proven that the consensus of what people think and believe is a liberal lie that has no relation to greenhouse gas. So all these activists and this, we've lost 3 decades because of these scientist cunts didn't do their fucking homework and overstepped their mandate. We had an option. If there hadn't have been such stupid shits, we had an option back in 1970. We could have done stuff. For the last 20 years, we can't do anything because they stole the time we had by trying to be politicians and massaging the message and trying to do PR and stuff, completely beyond their mandate. And so, now we find ourselves in a position where they're still harping on about, consensus and mustn't lose hope and stuff like that. But there definitely will never be any hope of any kind of mitigation or eco-restoration or anything that they're trying to achieve. The reason is no one's standing on dead ground. If there hadn't have been such stupid liberal left-wing fuckheads and just talk to somebody, say, in the military would say, No, you got to put the public on dead ground. Don't give them any fucking options. And then, the liberals have said, oh, but that's so, that's not nice. And say, well, do you want extinction or nice? You can only pick one. And so then basically we would have been in a much better position. But because they're crap psychologists and they listen to psychologists and economists and they're fucking Boy Scouts and don't understand the real world and have no access to the reality and the military and the real world, then we got sold up the garden path by all these believe the scientists and education. It's like, that cost us our fucking planet, you fucking morons. And so yeah, if you had have got, say, some guy that was really in charge, he would have said, like, no, put these fucks on dead ground. If anybody said, hey, can we use solar panels? Say, no, you fucking idiot. It'll work. Bang. So, what about wind farms? No, that's fucking ludicrous. Bang. So like, but we've got no hope. And say, no, you're fucked. And so then people would have been listening. But nobody listened. Why? Because they sold them hope. What did you expect? They're such bad strategists. Every fucking scientist should have got rid of Foucault and put fucking Sun Tzu on the fucking shelf. Then we would be in a better place. But still all this crap goes on. As we've seen Extinction Rebellion and all this stuff. So late in the day, they're going to come to the conclusion as maybe we should use kryptonite and say, yeah, genius, what's the point now? Now there's absolutely no hope and it's underlined. So it's like...
But maybe just to revert slightly back to the things that happened before the Blue Ocean event, potentially, like, say, the hyperinflation, the next financial crisis, maybe that is the thing that wakes people up from their comfortable hope, because then they won't be so comfortable. Because the thing is, as we were saying before, they've been shocking everyone continually, and it doesn't work because everybody's so distracted in their comfortable lives. When that happens, when they inflate this thing into the stratosphere, which they've already done, but we're just starting to feel the consequences, they're going to keep going with this. They're not going to default. They've either got two options, haven't they? They default or they hyperinflate it. I mean, if they defaulted, then, that would just be... I can't see that happening. Everyone really would be running around with their hair on fire. But at least if they hyperinflate, they get out of it, don't they? They say, well, we can just, we were doing the right thing. That was the only thing we could do. And they get rid of the debt. But then, finally, the people wake up and say, oh, fuck, my life, I can't do it, I've got a wheelbarrow full of money to pay for anything, obviously it won't be currency, it'll be digital, but what I'm saying is, at that point, the public would be like, fuck, well, because people were pretty angry at the banks after the last time, and I think another fuck up, they're going to be like, hang on a minute, finally they might actually wake up. I don't know, maybe they won't, maybe they'll just do as they're told and go to some camp. But maybe that's the point when they wake up, and because they'd be on dead ground by then. Maybe, I don't know.
This is why I have my hair on fire, because they're going to wake up. It's for certain they're going to wake up. They're like, everybody on the Titanic at some point gets to realize that this ship's going down. The problem is that it comes too late. It's already too late. So the worst scenario of all is that they have a later awakening, because we're in the situation in North Korea or Zimbabwe. So they will hyperinflate to basically, if you look at the US dollar today, you're holding a Zimbabwean dollar. But here's the thing. Zimbabwe and North Korea survive because of China, and Zimbabwe because of the surrounding African states. So there's no other planet to actually help us survive when we go into that situation. So you have to imagine you've got Mugabe or you've got Kim Jong-un, and they're totalitarians, and everybody's starving. It's like, well, now it's better that you don't have an awakening in a way, because basically this is it's kind of like it only gets worse after, a delayed awakening is worse than even no awakening. It's, at some stage, it's better that you just let them shuffle forward to the gas chamber. You see, if it makes it worse, if you think of the analogy of, say, Auschwitz, is like either you start early and have an awakening before you get to the Auschwitz, or when, before they really start putting people through the meat grinder. But already when they, already putting people in the gas chambers, it's like, that's the wrong time to have an awakening. Then you start running around like a headless chicken. They just start shooting more, and they just basically, they will get worse to get you in the gas chambers. So it kind of, it's only good to have an epiphany while you've got options. And our options are gone.
Sorry to interrupt. No, I guess I'm not. Yeah, I get all of that. I think we all get all of that. What I'm saying is, maybe they can hyperinflate this motherfucker, all the way up to the Blue Ocean event. I'm suggesting maybe that financial crisis happens before, in which case maybe at that point more people wake up and go, hang on, I'm in dead ground here, and fuck the state. And I'm not saying it's necessary. I'm not saying anything like it's savable. That would be a solution, but at least then people are, going kryptonite against the system, because it's happened before. Because arguably this could happen much quicker. I've read When Money Dies about the whole Weimar situation. That went on for quite a while, but now everything is so fast and it's all digital currency. This could happen really fast. And if that happens and then people are just left with no wherewithal, I don't know, but it depends how it plays out, because of course they could just go straight away and say, oh, here you go, come to daddy, here's the cryptocurrency to solve all of that. But hopefully by that point people will have woken up and gone, hang on a minute, this is all fucking bollocks, like this isn't worth anything, because they might just try it like they did, in previous hyperinflations, various points in history, where they tried to say, hang on, no, here you go, look, here's a new shiny object, use this instead. But it didn't work, like we were saying before in the Assignon and those types. I don't know. I'm just thinking before the final showdown, so to speak. It could be that this financial crisis happens quicker than we think, or maybe they're really clever and they hide it from everyone somehow.
No, you nailed it. You answered your own question there, because they want a financial collapse, right? So they want a financial restructuring more than anybody. So it's exactly as like if you go and look at the French with the Signat, they just scrap the old currency and make a new currency. So they're gonna, the reason why they're into crypto and stuff is so that when they get hyperinflation of the dollar and the euro and all these crap currencies, they're going to put you on this new currency. Now, the people are not going to see it for what it is, because it'll be like food stamps. Nobody thinks of food stamps as currency, or they don't think about inflation of food stamps. So they'd say like, okay, your dollars are worthless, but here's assistance, and then you're in Allison's world. So they going into this with their eyes open, right? They're in control. The guys in the BIS and this Klaus Schwab's financial Great Reset it's being very carefully orchestrated. But what's happening because they've done experiments, and they always experiment. So they've done the demonetization experiment in India. You can see what happened. They've done it in Cyprus. They've done bail-ins in Cyprus. All of them worked very well. From the totalitarian perspective, from the people's perspective, they were a disaster. But they demonetized India. They learned all the lessons, and I presume they've altered their plans so that they're ready for the big rollout. But it's all laid out in front of us. Is that they will remove. They'll take any money you have in the bank with bail-ins, and then they will give you some alternative currency that is something like blockchain that is a crypto and digital currency that allows them to do tracking and particularly weaponize philanthropy and all Allison stuff. So everything will come with strings attached. So you'll get your social assistance and you'll get your medical and stuff based on these conditions, and that's how they keep control. So that they need this current system to collapse just because they need cash to collapse. So that's one of the reasons why I created Geodo and another currency is you want some competing currency. For example, in Greece, the drug dealers and the black market and stuff, they use drachma. Their currency is drachma. They deal with each other in drachma. So it's the old currency because they need their untraceable currency in the black market that they can use with exchange with each other. And so it's very important that they take currency out of our hands. And so that's where they're getting to. Their problem is the huge accounting nightmare. You see, as soon as the Goldman Sachs and all these, the kind of that collapse on Wall Street, is there are a lot of lawsuits and a huge accounting problem. But in terms of just demonetizing the public, that's on the cards. That's coming. So you must prepare. We as the prepare for exactly how we cope with it. But the main thing is to get out of the currency system. Is to find alternatives, get back to real money and gold and silver. But even gold and silver is not a slam dunk because they'll try and seize it, right? They're going to try and confiscate it and stuff like that. So none of this is an easy run.
What's your opinion on things like Monero and privacy coins? I know it's cryptocurrency. I know you don't like Bitcoin. I'm just interested to know. I mean, surely that's more feasible than gold and silver. I mean, obviously, if you're talking like a real sort of at the real bitter end, like when things are really falling apart, then gold and silver could logically have its place. But in the interim, that's a kind of that's a pretty good candidate for being very anti-government privacy coin. Not without its faults as well, though.
Yeah, but any digital currency, all of them are some flavor of a Ponzi scheme. So the original Bitcoin and Satoshi and that, and so the whole thing was based for tracking criminals and seeing who sold shit to who. So, and it turned out that most of it was used for corrupt Chinese officials to get their money offshore. But they've shut it down in China, and so crypto is only kept alive as long as the Ponzi scheme is going. But it's a pure Ponzi scheme, so you'll be wiped out just like anybody that went for Ponzi stamps.
Yeah, sure, but I mean, I'm just talking about like just getting by, like if you had some chips in the system, just for like day to day. You see what I'm saying? Or you're just saying? Cause, I mean, that would be at the point when they take down the internet or something. I mean, I don't know. Like there are like options, aren't there, using satellites and things like that. I don't know, like how feasible that is, but people have talked. I know there's been discussion before about there is ways to like independently connect to a satellite to use it, for Bitcoin, for example. I'm not an advocate, and I massively agree. I agree with most of what in that respect what you're saying about the philosophy of it and what it was used for. But just as a sort of as an alternative to for example, the tokens that the government are going to issue you, which you really don't want to be using because they're going to be like, no, you're going to have to spend that on what we tell you to spend it on. You're only allowed to spend this much this week on Coca-Cola or alcohol or whatever.
Yeah, the cryptocurrencies are only around under sufferance from the government. So as soon as they're inconvenient for the governments, they're gone. They'll shut them. You see, this is what all these blockheads and stuff that I talk to and hate me so much for saying that the cult is going nowhere is that they think it's a technical problem, and they think that, you know, oh, we have satellites and all this stuff, and it's like, dude, they're going to shut it down by terror. All they say is, you know, we cut your fucking fingers off if you catch you with Bitcoin, and that's the end of Bitcoin. So it's like all cryptos are you know, just the based on what, you know, the government, you can't get out of the government's clutches by getting a very clever, geeky solution. And that's what all these geeks think, that they will get ultimate power by being clever. And you say, no, the government doesn't care how clever you are. They understand you better than you. And you say, well, cut your balls off if you use Bitcoin. And that's the end of Bitcoin. So it's like, it's nothing to do with how clever you are on the blockchain. And, oh, let me explain it to you. You don't understand. And it's like, no, you don't understand. That's not how the world works. It's not about, it's about being terrorized. And they'll terrorize you out of using it. But now, so then what's the approach to it? Well, a diversity of opinion is good. So as the Extinctionati, we want people to be as diverse in their opinion and try all of these things. But the way I see it is, you have to be nimble. You have to survive the collapse of the currency. You have to make sure that you have crypto and gold and silver and stuff, and other people have different strategies. And then we work together. When it all hits the fan, then you say, oh, Tom's the crypto guy and crypto's gone through the moon. And then it's important that Tom doesn't say, yeah, well, I'm a crypto billionaire now, so fuck the Extinctionati. You must go, you know, oh, this is the thing that panned out. Now you share it amongst everybody else. Then when crypto goes to the wall, then, you know, Sophie's got tons and tons of gold and silver stored away with leprechauns in Ireland. I thought it next to the rainbow.
The pot of gold.
That's where they are.
Well, anyway, you know how to find a leprechaun and like hold him hostage till he tells you where his pot of gold is.
Loads of old bridges around here.
Yeah, so then we go to Sophie, and that's how my vision of this mutual network works, all the way down to, you know, eventually the grid goes down, and then you know that somewhere, you know, basically people have boats, people have this, people have that, and we all know because we advertise it. And in fact, if you take this seriously enough, if we get enough funding and get this off the ground, which I can never do, but if we ever got to that stage, then you'd advertise it on the fucking internet, like all the preppers think you're crazy to do. You say, no, you want a site where it says, you know, I live in New Zealand, I have, you know, I'm growing, you know, poppies in the backyard, and I can supply this, this, and this. You say, well, but that's crazy. You'll get people flooding to you and say, like, yeah, in which case you'd give it all up. 200 people arrive on your doorstep, you'd give it all up. It's like, this is, yeah, that's the way to survive. So you've got mobility, you've got lots of options, and basically lots of people with lots of different skills. And you say, like, okay, everybody else is a fuckhead and they're not going to survive. We need to discuss exactly what places you want to be, how to survive. If it's like, say, oh shit, Hugh made a fucking big mistake. He didn't consider that if you're on a boat, this happens. And you say, okay, well, even though the internet's down and the world is fucked, you will, even if you're trekking overland like you're the star of the Ice Age cartoon or something, you will know that, like, oh, such and such is here, you know this, you know that and stuff. And then go, okay, boats are out, try overland trek to some other person's idea.
You're going to make a map like in Pirates of the Caribbean, and we'll have all the different places and all the hidden codes and sigils for people to find each other. I mean
it. That's what I'm about. That's what I'm doing. It's basically you need a sigil to say you're a member of the Extinctionati. It's a secret sign, like the fish for the Christians and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it is like, you see, what works with survival, if you go and look at all these scenarios, is like, you don't have to be a jack of all hands. You just need one damn skill that makes you useful to the tribe. So, all these guys, all these preppers all think you have to be like Bear Grylls and it's like, no, you just have to know Bear Grylls. You only need one guy that knows what Bear Grylls, and he can look after 200 people. So, you don't have to like sailing or whatever. You just have to know where one pirate is. And then you communicate it on this, you will know if we spend enough time discussing all of this stuff and, share the same egregore, you will know that, I know that, this event happens. Well, I know where Hugh will be. And then you can go there, and chances are you'll find me there because we all discussed it and thought the same way. But that's how you survive. But,
Yeah, there's a lot of value in like serendipity, and you give to the universe, and like it'll give back, and the community. It's a bit like well, not to take it down Buddhism, but if you sort of if you give, then quite often you get back, don't you? That doesn't mean you want to be individualistic. You want to be like sharing everyone's skills, but it's so true. If you just take a chance and discover, and things go your way, the universe gives back.
Yeah, it's all about trust. It's all about trust. And in order to trust, you have to let go.
Yeah, but so that's what sigils were for. So the early Christians, the reason why they could just draw a little fish in the sand is that, and if anybody doesn't know the secret code, then, they would just think you were just drawing a fish in the sand. But if you're a Christian, then you knew that the guy's signaling to you that he's a fellow Christian. So that's the same with Freemasons and the secret handshake and stuff. And the point of the secret handshake is that then you instantly know you can trust this person, and you know what the deal is. So as soon as somebody is in the Extinctionati, you know that they work by the Desiderata Extinctionati. You know the way they think. You can communicate over the tops of everybody's heads, even in the same room. So as soon as you made some signal, you could signal. So say, okay, here, imagine this movie scenario. Happens with Freemasons, right? The Freemasons were in the police for the UK police are riddled with Freemasons. There's a good reason for it, because imagine you're under interrogation by some in some hellhole in some police thing or something. You think this guy might be an Extinctionati. You make a secret symbol that only he realizes what you're signaling, and you establish, he's a secret Extinctionati. Well, you as the prisoner interrogated, and he as the guy on the inside, you can own the whole precinct working together. If nobody else knows that's what you're doing. So that's the whole power of it. That's why, in so many ways, it's like, as soon as you establish that somebody knows the secret handshake, then you can use the secret currency. You can tell them about this and that and stuff like that. And that's how all of this stuff works. That's how you survive totalitarianism. It's by having a society that's underground that escapes the immune system of the bigger system. So that's the whole point, right? But you have to get to an egregore where everybody thinks the same. It doesn't really work if these people, if it's a big tent and these people think, oh, there's still time for solar panels and wind farms. It's like, well, they're not really on the same page. They still got a little work to do. So but that's why I say that, like, Faulty and that making a big mistake, because they're embarking on this idiocy with this naive idea that everybody can reach a consensus without putting in the work to actually reach an egregore and actually agree. So they want to short circuit the whole thing on this fool's idea that we're all the same underneath, and this liberal thing is like, no, we fucking aren't. We're not even close to being the same. Look at all the people in the guys in Extinction Rebellion, these guys would sell you out for animal rebellion, you know. And then these guys are Christians. Well, they're going to fucking do you in for some fucking Christian thing about abortion. You don't know where you stand. You could never conspire with any of those guys or have a secret handshake because you might tread on one of their sacred landmines, like, you know, there'd be trans or something, and then you'd be like offend their trans thing without realizing it, and then they'd fucking execute you. So it's like, you know, you first have to establish this unity of and this single mind. Then you can do anything. They're starting with the easy shit. You got to do the difficult shit first and establish the egregore. That's why things like the White Lotus Society and stuff was so fucking dangerous for the Ming Dynasty and stuff like that, because there were a bunch of people that understood each other, were all comrades, and were against the system, and the system couldn't ferret them out. They never knew that basically this high official or those peasants might be in cahoots with each other, you know, but they just signal across the room. So it's like terribly dangerous, because the state can't get that kind of unity. They just keeping people together by fear, coercion, by indoctrination, all these tricks. And then these guys come that like just of one mind. It's like the Borg.
Yeah, it's literally like creating a community again, like a real one, not a fake one like the state does. Yeah.
So there's a lot of weeding that goes on, and a lot of, you know, this is what I feel is a good use for social media, is you weeding out undesirables and stuff, and just slowly build, and see where you get to, and then when the shit hits the fan, you take the stage with what you got. But anyway, this is why I want to grow the Extinctionati and get just step by step. So I don't think this is all happening like tomorrow. We've got years, so yeah. And anyway, I hope I'm not selling you down the garden path, but I think we have warning. You can maybe that's my conceit, but I think you'll be able to read this. You'll be able to read the flipping. You'll be able to see how far it's gone, and so, you know, especially if you widen the network and share all this information. So yeah, there's what we were about. So it's good to get out. Well, should we round it up then? Wind it up. All right. Anybody got any closing thoughts or anything that they want?
Actually, yeah, nothing comes to mind. Sorry.
Okay, so let's just do the discipline of just being mindful and just fall still. Om Paramatmane Namah. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Stay well during the week.
Be safe
Thank
out
you.
there.
Oh yeah.
Avoid
Smooth
the
sailing.
G. Avoid the G. The G variant.